Okay, so as you can see there, Marie-Josée Augue has more than a year to issue all of her recommendations how Canada can better protect its elections. But in a minority government, the next election could happen at any time. So could this inquiry actually delay action that needs to be taken? Michael Wernick served as clerk of the Privy Council from 2016 to 2019, and he joins me now. Mr. Wernick, good to talk to you again.
Thanks for reaching out.
The opposition parties, they seem to be happy that a public inquiry is finally happening. They think this is a realistic and viable mandate, the way it's set up, but you posted on social media today, you're not convinced. What are your concerns here?
Well, I was at a House committee twice in the spring. Here we are in September, that much closer to the next election. I'm not criticizing or second guessing the mandate or the choice of the commissioner. They look fine. It's an instrument that'll do a good job of going over the past. It's not an instrument that's going to do a good job of getting us ready for the future. The next election's coming soon. So I think there are things that our elected MPs and the senators could be doing while the commission is rolling through and looking at the past.
No, when I looked at this today, it seemed to me the calendar is one of the biggest challenges, right? Because of the uncertainty in the political calendar too. So you suggested that the government needs to act now, sort of in tandem with this inquiry going on. What do you want to see them do to make sure things are in better shape than they are at the moment for the next election?
Well, to be clear, I'd like to see all of the political parties continue in this spirit of nonpartisanship and national interest and pledge to work together to get legislation and other tools in place before the next election. And that means they have to start the work now.
So you had suggested, I believe, back in April that the government should basically copy and paste from a national security bill in the United Kingdom and adopt those specific measures to help deal with this here in this country. I mean, what is it you think we could take from the UK and move on before Justice Augue has finished her job?
Well, the Australian Parliament and the UK Parliament have gone through the process of drafting, amending, debating legislation. They have surfaced and debugged a lot of the issues. So there's a lot to learn there. I would think that about 80% of any Canadian bill would look very, very similar to the one in the UK. There are issues about definitions of treason and espionage. The registry is only a small part of it. In the UK, there was quite a controversy about protections for journalists, what's legitimate diplomacy. There are very sensitive issues about how it affects law firms and consultants. And there's sensitivities about how it affects the activities of political parties between elections on fundraising. So there's a lot of issues that can be discussed. There's no reason that a parliamentary committee or a Senate committee couldn't study the UK and Australian laws, call in some of their experts by Zoom. It wouldn't be outlandish for a parliamentary committee to go to London and talk to people. The commissioner's views will certainly, help, but maybe tweak it, but they're not going to change the basics. You can't really outsource the job of debating and crafting legislation. That's not the job for a judge or an inquiry. They're going to be busy going through the past. This is the job that legislators have to step up and take on.
Well, and the timelines that the inquiry is operating under are not necessarily the timelines that these foreign states and these perceived bad actors are going to adhere to. I mean, there's reports today that Microsoft says suspected Chinese operatives are using AI-generated images to mimic U.S. voters to sort of create chaos and confusion. So when you hear that and you look at the process we're on here in Canada, I mean, what goes through your mind?
Well, as I said, the parliamentary committee, we know there was interference, attempts at interference in the American presidential election, the French election, the German election. It's a clear and present danger, and we can't really wait to get better tools in Canada.
So I just wonder if these timelines hold and if the government doesn't necessarily move aggressively while the inquiry is going on. If you look at the confidence and supply agreement, if this holds into 2025, can you run a public inquiry with a multi-stage reporting process that ends at the end of next year and credibly have measures in place to safeguard an election in the spring or fall of 2025? Like the machinery of government just move fast enough to do something like that?
I think it's about the machinery of Parliament, and the answer is probably not. If you believe that the Parliament will go the distance, and that's a big question mark, there are about 200 quality sitting days to be allocated, and some of them are going to have to go to other things. So they can simply run out of time. All of the issues that I mentioned before are going to be of interest. There are going to be witnesses that want to be heard. Actually sort of debugging and crafting legislative language is not something you just rush through. I think it is important to get it right. But there's a lot of sort of pre-study and drawing out of views and opinions that can be done in parallel. There's no reason the MPs can have to just sit around all winter sort of using the news coverage to throw snowballs at each other. They can actually do some of the work to be ready.
So, I don't know if you're going to get your wish of the nonpartisan, coming together that we saw today, continuing, politics being what it is. But what is something you think you could see? Is it the hearings? Is it the committees working in an aggressive fashion in the fall to show you that there's going to be meaningful action made on this in Parliament while the judge does her job?
I think they can come together and figure out what it is that they can do. There's no reason that the government couldn't table some sort of draft bill and put it before a committee. It might be more constructive to put it before the Senate, where things are a little bit less partisan. There are quite a few things that could be done. There were things that were mentioned in the news release, which were launched but not completed. So let's see some check marks and get some of those things completed. I actually take some encouragement from the polls this week. Mr. Poilievre is now a prime minister in waiting. So it's a great opportunity for him to show that he can be constructive and a bit less partisan, and the parties can come together and continue, to move forward so that we're not arguing about the legitimacy of the next election.
Okay, sir, I want to thank you for your time and your perspective. That's former clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Wernick. The Liberal government says Justice Marie-Josée Augue will bring a fresh perspective to an inquiry on foreign interference, with her appointment supported by opposition leaders.
We believe Justice Augue has all of the necessary experience, credentials, and judgment to lead this important work.
While we accept the terms of reference and the nomination of Justice Augue, Conservatives will be watching like hawks.
All right, up against tight timelines, Augue will have to deliver an interim report by the end of February and a final report by the end of 2024. And here to help unpack how this will all work, Stephanie Carvin is a former national security analyst. Artur Wilczynski is a former assistant deputy minister at Communications Security and Establishment, and they both join me now. Gang, it's been a minute. It's good to talk to you again. The foreign interference file is back on the front burner. So, Steph, let's start with you. I mean, what's your take on this choice, this decision? Is Justice Augue the right person to do this job?
Well, I don't think it was a secret that the government was having some issues in trying to find someone appropriate for this role. For whatever reason, it was determined that it needed to be a federally appointed judge, perhaps for the perception of neutrality with regards to whoever took on this role. But yeah, I mean, there are some concerns. I mean, we could talk about the short time frame that really this inquiry will have, but also the fact there is no obvious national security background here. Now, if I was going to be a little bit generous in looking at her background, I would say she does have, on top of litigation, she apparently does have some expertise in administrative law and constitutional law, and both of those will be very helpful. Because national security law is very much administrative law. We don't really think of it that way, but that will be a useful background, but it's going to be more than just admin law.
Right. So, but Artur, you can staff up with national security expertise, right? You can get really smart people who've worked in this to come in and work for the justice and guide her through this. But, she doesn't start until September 18th. She's got to have a report done by the end of February in both official languages, and that seems like the calendar is going to be a challenge potentially.
The calendar will be a challenge, but I think it's really important to let her do her work. The process for selecting the commissioner is one that's established in practice. That the Judicial Council provides recommendations about how to select justices. I'm glad that we have somebody of her caliber who's going to take on the role.
Okay, Artur, I got to cut you off there. We've got technical gremlins attacking the audio, and it's all distorted. So we're going to reconnect with you. So, Steph, that means more FaceTime for you while we reconnect with Artur and try to get his audio working.
It's my interference.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. He's being hacked by a hostile actor. Well, Steph, you raised a timeline question right off the top. Just tell me your concerns here, right? Does it seem too ambitious to do this full forensic, backwards-looking examination of the 2019 and 2021 elections and all of the issues that have been raised and have a full report done by the end of February?
Yeah, I mean, if you recall, I mean, I was on your show quite a lot last fall with the Public Order Emergency Commission, right? And that was a full year. They had a full year to put that together, and they still argued it wasn't enough time. This is half of that. And if you think of all the things that need to be done, staffing up is going to be minimum 4 to 6 weeks. And then at the back end, translation, producing the report, kind of having everyone give the stamp of approval, that's going to take another 4 to 6 weeks as well. So what you're left with is really a 3.5 months. So that's a big concern. Now, to be fair, it's clear that Justice Og will have all of the work that's already been done that was available in the previous
the special rapporteur process. Yeah,
the special rapporteur process. So, and that's good. And hopefully, the security services have been seeing the writing on the wall, and so hopefully they have been preparing for this in advance. So this won't be coming as a total surprise. That they will have some packages ready to go and hit the ground running. But yeah, I mean, this is a big deal, right? And to produce a report of this magnitude in such a short period is going to be a very demanding task.
There's been suggestions from Michael Wernick and from others that the government needs to be aggressive on doing other things, in a concurrent timeline with the inquiry, that they can't just wait until December 2024 for the final report. What's your sense of where the weaknesses are on things that they can move on in that interim time frame? We know there were consultations on the Foreign Agents Registry. We're going to hear something on that later this fall, but where do you think they need to act in the time they have?
So I listened to the Wernick interview, and it was really good. And I would echo a lot of the things that he said. I know radical agreement is not the most entertaining television, but just to reiterate, looking at the national security bills that have recently been passed in the United Kingdom in particular is good. They've actually defined certain economic crimes. They've also defined, foreign interference. Foreign interference is not actually a crime in Canada, even though we recently saw something of a charge of that nature, but it wasn't actually a foreign interference charge. So these are kind of new crimes that we could have on the book to kind of clarify the activities, agree on the foreign interference registry, and also, taking a look at some of our outdated national security legislation, not necessarily giving CSIS all the power it wants, but definitely updating ways that the service can, say, communicate outside of government, right, in a limited and transparent fashion. So I think there are a number of ways that we can actually be much more proactive in trying to counter some of the foreign interference issues that are out there. For example, if there are institutions that are being targeted, can we provide them better advice going forward? Right.
Okay. Artur, I think Steph has stopped hacking your feed, so we're going to get you in now so we can get your thoughts on this. Pick up where you left on the time frame, and if you have any concerns about Justice Og not having sort of a national security background.
I'll answer the second question first. I have no issues with her not having a national security background specifically. What we need is somebody who has credibility, somebody who's able to look at the broad scope of the issues that are there, somebody who's familiar with administrative law, somebody who can actually bring people together in an examination of the complexity of the issue. And I think the fact that her mandate is done within the context of the Inquiries Act, the fact that she has a very clear terms of reference, and most importantly, the fact that she has a broad supportive mandate from all political parties in the House of Commons, I think is fundamentally important. I'm also of the view that the perfect sometimes is the enemy of the good. We've had a lot of time pass since we first started talking about this. I think as I mentioned earlier, I was trying to say, more time has passed since we first started calling for an inquiry than the amount of time that the justice has in reaching her first report. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I think we need to get on with it.
Yeah, so on that point, Artur, I know it's a shorter horizon perhaps than David Johnston would have had available had that process continued. But it seems at this point that Justice Og will avoid the political wood chipper that the former Governor General was put through here in Ottawa. So how does removing that sort of partisan rancor, I mean, they may criticize some of the findings, but it doesn't seem like the judge, she seems to be immune from what we saw earlier this year. How does that help?
Well, I think it helps because the entire issue is around restoring credibility in our democratic institutions. And if the process that is supposed to be put in place to build that confidence or restore that confidence is put in question, that challenges the entire enterprise. That was the problem that Mr. Johnson faced. So the fact that we're starting off from a perspective where everybody thinks that there's legitimacy in the person, legitimacy in the process, I think that will build confidence in both the things that are going to be said. It'll build confidence for those individuals who need to come before her to share their expertise and share their testimony. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, I think it'll build confidence on the part of the general public that the government and the rule of law is going to prevail here.
Stephanie, just as a final point, where are you on that? Do you think they found the credible path forward that sort of satisfies things? I mean, we talked to Kenny Chu a little bit earlier, the former Conservative MPs worried that it's broadening out beyond China. It may get away from like the biggest actor in this area. I mean, what's your sense? Do you think this can restore the public confidence and bring credibility to the outcome?
Points that Artur made, I have seen people being upset at other states, but we also don't know what we don't know, right? Yeah. The fact is that other states learn from each other in doing these activities, and they also do it in different ways. So if we are going to take a look at securing our state, looking in our democratic processes, why not look at all threats, right? Why not take this opportunity to look at all threats? Now, you might argue the tight timeline would be a good reason not to do that, and I might agree with that. But I do think this is, this isn't just a one state problem. One state might dominate, and certainly in our current conversations, but why not, let's take a broad view, because it's not very often we have these inquiries for good reason, and I would rather be slightly more comprehensive than less.
Okay, we got to leave it there. Artur, sorry about the technical problems. It's just we got to get you guys into the studio the next time we talk about this. Artur Wilczynski, Stephanie Carvin, thanks so much for the time.
Cheers.
Thank you.